Okay, let's say our Asok B'divrei Torah blessing together. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kivshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Praise to you, Lord our God, ruler of the universe, who has made us holy with your commandments and command us to busy ourselves with the words of Torah. So we begin with a palm tree. This is a date palm tree. You can see the circle of dates at the top. This is a palm tree, or a grove of palm trees near the present site of Jericho. I took this picture a year ago, 13 months ago on my way to the Dead Sea. And Jericho is described in the Bible as a city of dates, Ir Tamarim. And that is one of the reasons why it is one of the oldest inhabited cities in the world, because it was near the Jordan River, so they had water, and it had good soil for growing dates, so they had food, and they had something to trade with other people. So that is our date palms. Okay, Rachav is, just to make sure we're all on the same page, Rachav is a prostitute who lives around 1200 BCE in the city of Jericho at a time when the Israelites were camped across the Jordan River. Last time, we looked at Act 1. So in Act 1, Joshua is now in charge. Moses has died. I'm sorry if that's a spoiler alert for any of you about the Bible, but Joshua is in charge. He sends 2 spies to go check out Jericho. They go to Rachav's house. The king of Jericho is told that there are some spies here for the Israelites. He tells Rachav to produce the spies. She says, well, they were here, but then they went somewhere else, and if you go chase them, you might find them. And so then they get chased, but actually the spies are still in her house. All right, so that was Act 1. Questions about this before we go on to Act 2? Okay, seeing none, on to Act 2. Doris, would you read, please?
Sure. The spies had not yet gone to sleep when she came up to them on the roof. She said to the men, I know that God has given the country to you because dread of you has fallen upon us, and all the inhabitants of the land are quaking before you. For we have heard how God dried up the waters of the Sea of Reeds for you when you left Egypt, and what you did to Sihon and Og, the 2 Amorite kings across the Jordan, whom you doomed. When we heard about it, we lost heart, and no one had any more spirit left because of you. The eternal your God is the only God in heaven above and on earth below. Now, since I have shown loyalty to you, swear to me by God that you, in turn, will show loyalty to my family. Provide me with a reliable sign that you will spare the lives of my father and mother, my brothers and sisters, and all who belong to them, and save us from death. The men answered her.
Okay. Up at the top.
Our lives are pledged for yours, even to death. If you do not disclose this mission of ours, we will show you true loyalty when God gives us the land. She let them down by rope through the window, for her dwelling was at the outer side of the city wall, and she lived in the actual wall. She said to them, make for the hills so that the pursuers may not come upon you. Stay there in hiding 3 days until the pursuers return, then go your way. But the men warned her, we will be released from this oath that you have made us take when we invade the country. You tie this length of crimson cord to the window through which you let us down. Bring your father, your mother, your brothers, and all your family together in your house. And if anyone ventures outside the doors of your house, their blood will be on their head.
Doesn't that sound familiar?
i.e., they shall be responsible for their own death, and we shall be clear. But if a hand is laid on anyone who remains in the house with you, their blood shall be on our heads. And if you disclose this mission of ours, we shall likewise be released from the oath that you made us take. She replied, let it be as you say. She sent them on their way, and they left, and she tied the crimson cord to the window. Would you like me to continue?
Yes, please, through context in question 1.
Context. This is the next part of the story. Note that ancient walled cities had an outer wall and an inner wall, with spaces for houses in between. The outer and inner walls were about 10 feet apart. The history and stories is not inevitable. People and authors make choices. At what points could this part of the story have turned out differently?
Thank you. All right, I'll bring the story back. Let's see. Yeah, that's a good bit of it. All right. So, how might this part of the story have turned out differently?
She could have ratted the spies out to the king.
Could have not asked that they make a pledge to save her family.
Perhaps Rahab could have tried to bargain with the spies, like, oh, that deal's not good enough, X or Y other things, or else I'll rat you out. But here it looks like she just sort of accepts their terms, so maybe she could have tried to bargain with them.
And they do bargain with her. They could have just, in a darker story, killed her. And then they don't have to worry about her possibly ratting them out at all.
What would have happened if she had never heard of God or believed in the God of the Jews?
Did she have to let them in?
Probably came into her place. Didn't she run the some kind of inn or something like that?
Yeah,
Also-
They came in as customers, right?
Yeah, so the original text is pretty clear that she was a prostitute. Some of the rabbis were uncomfortable with that and looked at the Hebrew term zonah, and said, well, actually, that's connected with the Hebrew word mazon, meaning food, like in Birkat HaMazon or Hazan et HaKol. So he was a person who provided food to people. He was an innkeeper. Either way, presumably the spies would have represented business one way or another when she first met them. So So she could have denied them entry, and that would have totally changed the story. But she might have wanted to let them in for business purposes.
But also, she certainly didn't have to cooperate with them.
It's true.
She's very credible. She pays lip service to the God of the Hebrews and says, yours is the God who's the God in the heaven and the God in earth. And it's not like, she didn't hesitate. She didn't conditionalize. She just said it outright, according to this text. I don't know what the Hebrew says in translation, but it seems to me like she was pretty credibly buying into this story. She was a lot like Yitro back in Shemot. That everybody's hearing about how the Reed Sea part and all that kind of thing. She's up on her history. She's up on her current events, and she knows what's going on, and she buys in.
Maybe there's an echo of Ruth.
One question that isn't answered, I don't think, is how did she know they were Hebrews when they first came there?
She checked their circumcision. She's a prostitute.
Well,
That's more sure than what I was going to say. I was going to say the noses. That's how Yosef proved himself to his brothers. According to comment, he dropped his pants and showed them his circumcision. I'm going to use.
Yep.
So I'm going to go against what I said about talking, because you know me, I can't stop talking. So, many years ago, I went to Paraguay with a boyfriend of mine, with his family, and I speak Spanish, and I was trolling around by myself, and I speak Spanish pretty well. It's not perfect, but it's pretty well. And I was trolling around and by myself, and somebody came up to me to say something, and I was under the huge misimpression that they would mistake me for a local because I wasn't in a tourist area. And they know right away, you don't belong there. Sometimes there's just something that sets you apart, the way you're acting or what you're wearing or whatever. Even if you speak the lingo, sometimes you're just set apart. They just know. And the other thing I want to add is somebody was, I don't know who said it, but somebody made a thought occur to my head. And, sometimes when people respond to news that they hear, like, God is great, and I heard all this stuff that happened and what, your God did for you. Her response was, and I believe in this God, because it occurred to me, I think this was an act of faith on her part and a siding with the God of the Israelites. Because what a lot of people do, if you look at, Haman, or you look at Pharaoh, or you look even in the present day, the reaction to people, even when they know and believe that something is true, if they feel threatened by it, they want to lash out and destroy it instead. And it's intriguing that her response was one of, no, I'm going to help you. I'm going to side with you.
Of course, another possibility is that this is simply words that were put in her mouth by the people who actually wrote down this story, who were probably Jewish and Israelite. I think the proper term for that would have been, they invented a proof text, quote unquote.
Is there a school of journalism about that, Cantor?
All I will say is that the Bible is full of proof texts in all sorts of contexts, and they certainly were not necessarily put in there by the people who are being quoted. Later editors were very busy.
So would that have been written as a contrast to how the spies behaved in the parsha that goes with it? Is that how they should have been?
There definitely is a lot of setting up of, I guess, a foil of saying like this spy mission is very much not like the previous spy missions that we read about a couple weeks ago in Parshat Shlach in Numbers 13 and 14, I believe. And so one of the aspects of the contrast is exactly what you said, Paul, that the Israelite spies couldn't believe that God would help them, but this non-Jewish prostitute who's living in the enemy territory can totally see them, can totally believe in God. So absolutely, that is one of the things going on here.
Interestingly, the initial incursion of the spies, of the 12 spies, we hear nothing about their exploits in the land. All we know is that they went to the land, they came back with a bunch of grapes. And a bunch of grapes.
We infer it, don't we? They came
I don't
back
know if
reporting the giants and the big people and the rugged people, and they're burying their dead and all that kind of thing. So they came back with a report. So we don't see what they're doing when they're there, but they come back having observed and reporting what they observed, is how I read it.
And we know nothing about their interaction with any of the people there.
But I have to salute you, Herb, for grapes and grapes. That's cute.
What bothers me is 10 of the 12 guys that went there, carving out Yoshua and Caleb. Those 10 guys were leaders of their people, their tribes. They were supposed to be righteous and men of example and leadership. And here we got the 2 spies where you don't know what they are, except they're Israelites, but we don't know what their role is within Israel. And yet they carry out a mission with faith. So it kind of tells you something about our tribal leaders back at the time of Shlach.
Righteous people can form different opinions.
I like how I was noticing how she had took advantage of the moment. It was like she kind of saw how God kind of felt probably God favor her. You don't know what she was thinking about or possibly even praying about. But that, when this situation presented itself to her, she was right in sync with it, and she understood basically what was going on. So I like how she basically, I don't want to say carpe diem, but she kind of like seized the opportunity and went with it.
Well said.
An opportunist to save her family. Everybody else was supposedly going to be annihilated or struck down or banished from the city and out in the sticks. City slickers aren't the greatest at surviving out in the countryside.
There's also a sharp contrast to Lot, who is faced with the angels grabbing him by the hand and say, "Come on, let's go. We got to go. This place is going to be destroyed." And he's lingering and he's looking to, he's trying to run his own agenda. And here she is, she's buying in, she's saving her skin and her family's, and she's buying into, she knows what she's doing with having her faith in God and knowing what's going on. There's some nice contrasts here in different parts of the Bible.
All right, let's go on to the next question. What might be the advantage of having a house in the wall of the city? Any disadvantages?
Well, if you're attacked, you're probably at a disadvantage being in the wall, but on the other hand, you can escape more easily than if you're in the middle of the city.
This also security. If you're up a couple of floors and just have one door or so access from ground floor, it's easier to control anybody coming in. Now, when I go to if I'm on the road and I go to a motel, I avoid a room on the first floor with the window on the ground floor.
I was thinking, in terms of maybe a potential advantage of having a house on a wall, could be that, and this thought process is a little bit based on, I believe, various traditions in the Hebrew Bible, and I think in the surrounding cultures literature too, that like the court cases in the city were held at the gates of the city.
Yep.
I think so. Maybe that would mean that you're like in the know of what's going on. Perhaps if your house is also in the wall and near the gate, so maybe you're hearing about all the stuff going on in the city.
Good, nice point, Gabriel.
Thank you.
Well said.
If two of the walls of her house were the walls of the city, that means two less walls to have neighbors on. And maybe a little more privacy, a little more security, a little less noise from your neighbors.
A little noise from the street and the filth as well.
Yep.
Why do people want to live in penthouses?
Also good.
All right. Question 3. In this part of the story, how might the spies be feeling about Rahab? And also, if I drop out, I apologize, hang in. I will come back and bring back the text. But you should be able to continue discussing. How might the spies be feeling about Rahab at this point of the story?
Let's hope we can trust her.
Very good point. Good
Yeah,
job.
that lack of trust is made evident by the threat, right? Like they obviously didn't immediately trust her. Wouldn't have bothered to be like, well, if you don't do this, etc.
Well, this is true, but suppose I'm sitting, if I were one of the spies and I said, oh, can I trust her? She's sending us to hide in this place. Maybe she's tipped off the king's guards on the other hand, and they'll just get rid of them, and I'll be in the good graces of the prince. Maybe they'll give me a reward.
Anybody want to take a trip back to Shmot? Night of the Makat Bechorot, and the people are admonished by God, stay in your houses with the blood on the doorposts. As I pass through, taking out the firstborn of the Egyptians and their cattle and all the strangers that are firstborn, you'll be safe in your houses. Sound familiar?
And even the symbolic marking of the house with the rope.
Here you go.
Right, like I mean, that thought it occurred to me too, right? Because it's yeah.
Not to get too sociological about this, but there's a really huge power differential between two professional military spies and a lady innkeeper / prostitute on her own, because she's obviously not living with the rest of her family. They have to be gathered in order to be saved when Jericho is going to be destroyed. And as I said last week, I have been in Jericho, and it was destroyed, and it was never totally rebuilt. So she was taking a huge chance with 2 professional military men. Give her a lot of credit for having that kind of faith in this strange Israelite God that was so different from their Canaanite gods.
So a question, if she lives in the house, in the wall rather, and she has her whole family there, living in the house, and they're told to stay in the house, and then the Israelites go marching around, blowing their trumpets as the walls collapse. How does that save her?
Well, she is convinced that God will save them, not her. And I think she's trying to curry some favor with this powerful God.
Don't they have to march around a few times to make that happen? Maybe they have some time to get out before the walls actually crumble.
But she is told that if they get out of the house, they take their life in their hands.
No, but if they, no, but not to, I don't, well, I'm taking a leap of faith that she's escaping with their acknowledgement. If they see her coming out from that house that has in the wall with that thread or that string, whatever rope, then they know it's her, and they know she's got to get out of there before the walls crumble. So I'm pretty sure they're okay at that point. If I'm thinking of the story as I am.
I can vouch for the fact the walls were not totally destroyed. It's not like it's not like when you go to the city of Jericho that it's nothing but piles of rubble. There are still standing walls. So I don't think all of the walls came tumbling down.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Building off of that, perhaps it could be the case that the sections of the walls that she was in was just less collapsed than other parts. So maybe it didn't like really collapse totally like in on her. Maybe just slightly did, and kind of left like an area that was like less destroyed, but still kind of destroyed, maybe.
Degrees of destruction. Good question.
All right, next question. Okay, why would Rahab trust the spies?
I kind of think that she probably could probably understood that she kind of was like at their mercy, because she spoke about how she heard of the victories that they did in wars before, and she knew that they were going to overtake them. So she was just basically at their mercy. That's how I'm thinking.
Heard of me. She already knew that Moshe had taken out Og and the other king. So she already knows that the Hebrews, after the Shalach incident, have paid their price in the wilderness. And now it's time to do. So one thing is, she knows how these huge kings of power have been disposed of already at our hands. And also, I was going to ask if this is the first historical incursion into the land west of the Jordan River. Because if other cities have already fallen, maybe not Wall or whatnot, then maybe Jericho already had heard about that too. But I don't know. I'm asking the question if this was the first.
Yeah, no, this is the first. This is the first stop. on the way into the land of Israel.
Okay. Okay, then I rest on my Og and Bashan point.
There's a little bit of a exchange here, though, right? Because both parties don't exactly trust each other. But there's a little bit, because she could betray them. They could have killed her or betray her. So there's a bit of an outreach, a little bit of an exchange here, an understanding, I think, of both their vulnerabilities in this particular moment.
I have a final thought. I know I've got opinions on this situation, but it occurs to me, if she was going to rat them out, she would have been well advised to do it early while they were still in her house. Once they got through the walls of the gates of the wall and had gotten out, if she ratted out them any time after that, she could have been considered a co-conspirator by her own king for having let them get away at that point to that extent. And even though she were ratting them out, he'd still want to make an example of her, is my opinion. If she were going to do it, she'd have to do it early on. I'm making a conditional statement.
Okay, next question. Tikva Freimer-Kensky, who is an academic who's written a book on the subject of women in the Bible, points out that Rahab is an outsider who announces that the Israelites will come from outside the land into it. And then Rahab comes from outside the Israelites into their protection. When have you transitioned from feeling like an outsider to an insider?
When I went to Canada to study at graduate school.
Well,
Every one of the 7 congregations that I served. Took a while before they accepted me and I understood what they were all about.
yeah. Well, I could say that for some of my experiences as well. When I left Chicago and went to Chile in the Peace Corps, and it took me about 6 to 8 months until folks began to accept me and trust some of the things I was trying to do to contribute to our activities in the Ministry of Agriculture. I would say they were skeptical. It took quite a while. But eventually, yes, I became part of the group, folks at the office, and that was interesting. So that's been my experience. And every time I've changed positions or gone down to different countries and I had to work with folks from different places, you can reach a level of trust.
For me, when I was in the military, going from like one post to another post, how you really don't know like anyone, so you kind of a outsider until you do start to gain the trust of other people. So.
She's doing that now.
Anybody? I'm gonna take that differently. All right. We have 9 minutes. Let's see if we can get through Act 3 then. Fran, would you be willing to read Act 3?
You'll have to. You'll have to move up the screen, I think, David.
Ah. Is that better? Okay, in the interest of time, I will read. They went straight to the hills and stayed there for 3 days until the pursuers turned back. And so the pursuers, searching all along the road, did not find them. Then the 2 men came down again from the hills and crossed over. They came to Joshua son of Nun and reported to him all that had happened to them. They said to Joshua, God has delivered the whole land into our power. In fact, all the inhabitants of the land are quaking before us. All right. We'll skip the first question for right now. How might Rahab be feeling at this point in the story?
The pursuers could have caught them. That would have been the end of them.
She saw them returning. She probably was relieved they didn't catch them.
But they crossed over. They left the city.
They left Jordan.
But they didn't, we have no record that they reported back to her and said that they would protect them. Right?
We're not there yet.
Say that again?
Well, she may be wondering, are they going to fulfill their promise?
Okay.
At this point.
And that's coming up. But at the moment, theoretically, 3 days go by and she doesn't hear back from them. So she's a bit exposed.
Fair enough. Good point.
Well, I would say what's going to happen to me will how is it going to, the walls coming down, are they going to keep up their end of the bargain now that I kept up with my end?
Exactly. Yep.
Pretty sure she's huddling with her family to figure out how she's going to get them into her house and keep them there quiet. That's my guess.
Yeah.
She's
What does she tell her family? Why they have to be there? Or if she can trust them not to go to the prince or his agents and say, look, this has happened. Trust their loyalty.
Yeah. The response is she's saving their neck. If she goes down, they go down. Kind of thing. So, and she said, hey, listen, I'm trying to save your necks with mine. Don't be ungrateful. Let's stick this out and see how it goes. But I'm pretty sure it's going with the Hebrews. That's what I would think.
Based upon the first 2 acts, aren't the spies sort of lying when they say that all the people are quaking before us? What evidence did we read to support that?
So that's a great question. Let's go back and see.
She says she was, they said she was, some people were.
Verse 9. Dread of you has fallen upon us, and all the inhabitants of the land are quaking before
you. I guess I missed that.
It's okay. It went by quickly and we didn't focus on it.
So it's almost that they're reporting more or less directly what she told them. That's the extent of this report right here to Joshua.
Right.
That's
so
the
how
problem.
Go ahead.
That's the problem with that's a problem for the intelligence officers. They talk to one person and then they report back, and she said to them whatever was convenient for her to say, or to put it in the way Cantor Neal might put it in the story. That was the way it came out. And now they take it as a report of fact. And we have to remember that she is to be regarded as, I think, as a traitor in her own community. Is that?
Yeah.
So that's a kind of a serious undertaking. I mean, it might look good from the point of view of the Israelites, but she's assisting them in their attack.
One of our wise classmates mentioned before, when you're living in the wall, you get to see what's going on at the gate, and you get to see the people's committee, like our Sanhedrin, or whatever, doing business at the gates, their business. And she gets to, the spies, when they're in her house, get to see how the people are behaving. They may have observed something for themselves to make a declarative statement like that too. Not just a report, but what they saw, even though they didn't say they saw it for themselves, but they could have seen it for themselves.
Well, yeah, but they were in Rahab's inn. If she had other travelers coming in and out and other visitors, people would be talking and having discussions.
Mm-hmm. That's it.
And, well, what local gossip? What are you talking about? Don't we talk about politics and the situation out there? Sure. When we're gathered around having a cup of coffee and then mom and pop cafe someplace on late morning or midday. So,
David, I think your question was, what was Rahab thinking?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
If I was at this point, if I was Rahab and I said, oh, the spies got away, and they told me, or I said to them that if they, basically got away for 3 days, I now, in my house, my pretty tiny house that's no bigger than 10 feet wide, have to get my father and my mother and my brothers and my sisters and their spouses and their kids and gather them all in my little house. What am I going to do? That's what I think she's thinking.
Yeah, a bit of dread for what's going to happen, right? Like, and hopeful that the Israelites fulfilled their oath to her, right? Now really at the mercy of them.
So looking at the time, I'm going to show you what else is in this source sheet. So we have an epilogue, couple chapters later on, where in fact promises are kept, and she is saved, her whole family is saved, and she and her family dwell among the Israelites. So promises made, promises kept. All right. After that, we have an anime version of this story. We have a Bible wrap version of this story. We have art from the 1880s of the story. And then, as was brought up, there are a lot of other parallels and allusions. In the story, the aforementioned Tikva Freimer-Kensky has a whole set of them, so I brought them for you in condensed form. We have Yael, we have Spies, we have the Egyptian midwives, we have Moses' mother, the Song of the Sea, the story of Bethel, Avimelech and Abraham, Lot, Judah and Tamar, the Exodus from Egypt, the story of Ai, Baal Peor, Jacob and Laban, Bathsheba, Jethro, Naaman, Deborah, Huldah, Ruth, and Abraham. If you have questions about what any of these stories are, email me, I'll be glad to explain. And finally, we have the Reader's Theater version. So if you want to see this as a play, you can look at that. I wrote it out for you. And then we have the full story. And an appendix of Rahab in the Talmud, a couple of references, and Racha versus the 12 Spies, a Dvar Torah from Moran Hirsch. So with that, I'm going to stop the share and stop the recording.